In April of 2021, a user named AlastDudeMC made a post on the custom map section of MinecraftForum.net titled 1.17 Escape Room Puzzle. The post has a handful of embedded screenshots, but no other text. One shows a cow next to a small house made of birchwood. Another shows a dimly lit, empty white hallway stretching far into the distance. The last one shows something else. Something tall and black with spines or spikes poking out of its head. At the bottom of the post is an expired download link. We can see the file it used to serve is called polybius.zip. This post received 47 views and no replies. Searching Polybius doesn't give us much that's relevant. The first few pages of results mostly talk about either the Greek historian and the cipher named for him, or the urban legend about an 80s arcade game that drove its players insane. Searching on Forge and Modrinth brings up a few hits, but again, nothing related. The first place that something meaningful shows up is the fan content sharing site Planet Minecraft. A world file called polybius.zip was uploaded there in July 2021, about a month and a half after that forum post. It has no preview pictures and was uploaded by a deleted account, so there's really only one way to learn more. The zip file has the usual content for a Minecraft save, a world.dat file and some folders for map data and other metadata. It also has something unique, a loose Java file called weird_candors.java. It's not clear why this file is here. As far as I know, Minecraft can't run stray Java code from the saves directory. Also, the word candors is spelled with a U, which is the British spelling. AlastDude's location was listed as New York. It's not immediately clear what the purpose of the code inside is. The world in the file is just called Polybius in lowercase. The version the world was created in is 21W15A, a snapshot from the 1.17 era. That matches the title of the forum post. I tried to open it on a later version, but the world that loaded seems to be a generic vanilla world, so it may only be compatible with that particular build of Minecraft. But it's not hard to install that snapshot. The player spawns on a floating cube of dirt 16 blocks wide. A small birch house surrounded by a fence is built on top of it. The color of the skybox and the ambient light suggest that it's daytime, but the sun isn't visible in the sky in any direction. Its rendering seems to have been disabled somehow. Inside the house, a crafting table and a furnace are set against the wall. A jukebox and some other furniture are stacked in a corner. A trapdoor in the opposite corner leads down a ladder to a cramped basement filled with hay bales. There's a lectern outside the house with a book placed on it. It's a poem. A venom rippled quietly all through Miss Seafoam's veins. It snaked on quite reliably until it found her brain. That night she was a dancer. Next morning she was dead. They found a shiny cancer blooming inside her head. If we look up the exact words of the first verse of that poem, it turns up a video uploaded by a YouTube channel called Grell235. This video is named 05-1521. That's May 15th, 2021, the upload date. The description contains the full text of the poem and some ASCII art. The video begins with someone opening Minecraft and going to the world menu. The first world on the list is called Polybius. The name is the same, but the world icon is actually different from the one in the world from Planet Minecraft. The map seems mostly the same at first. They spawn in front of the birch house. The first thing they do is turn around and try to punch a fence, but they're not in the right game mode to break things. To their left is a T-shaped tower of iron blocks capped by a pumpkin. This wasn't in the other world. This configuration of blocks should create an iron golem, but it hasn't done so here for some reason. On the other side of the lawn is the lectern with the same book. When the player flips to the second page, there's a muffled twang like an arrow firing somewhere under the ground. The lectern is sending a redstone signal somewhere off screen, but we don't get to see what it's triggering. They have a separate book and quill in the last slot of their inventory, but they ignore it for now. They enter the house. The trapdoor in the corner is already open. They climb down the ladder, but there's no basement, just a long, dark hole. At some point, while falling, their camera jitters as they seem to be teleported silently. Just before they reach the bottom, we can hear the sound of glass shattering as a splash potion hits them from above. They float gently down into the middle of a dimly lit white hallway. They're in the hallway from the screenshot in the last dude's forum post. Orange lamps are placed at regular intervals on the ceiling, painting the way ahead with fuzzy stripes of light and dark. There's a sound behind them. Something cracking or crunching. It's distinct from the glass shattering sound cue, more distorted. They turn, but there's nothing there. The hole they floated down from is gone. The ceiling has no gaps, and the corridor stretches behind them as far as it does in front of them. They check their inventory. They have about a minute of the slow-falling buff left. That's what the potion was. For a second, another buff is visible as well before it disappears. Pausing the frame, we can see the second buff is saturation. Some logic is running to keep their hunger bar full. We also get a chance to see their skin on this screen. It's a robot with bright golden eyes, wearing a light yellow jacket. They continue forward and walk into a wide, empty white room. A grid of 9 lamps arranged in a square pattern in the ceiling produce more dim lighting. In every direction in front of them, the walls open into other doorways leading to other white corridors. They start walking to the one straight ahead, but they're distracted by the sudden jarring sound of a sheep bleeding from somewhere to their right. They head that way and find another white room, this one a little different. There's a large arrow shape made of red wool on the floor. Also, there's a birch fence post in the center of the room. A sheep is leashed to it. It's had its wool sheared off. The sheep's nameplate reads Polly, with 1 L. It's around this time the player finally takes a look at the book and quill on their hotbar. It has 1 page with 2 lowercase words already written. Look down. The next part of the footage is a little repetitive. They plod down random halls and enter more white rooms. This area is a kind of uniformly built maze. Besides the sheep room, which seems to be unique, every other room is empty, with the same 9 lamps embedded in the ceiling and the same 4 equal-sized quartz walls. Sometimes those walls lead to corridors in other rooms, other times they're dead ends. There must be an outer limit to the maze eventually, but the player never reaches it in these videos. No matter how far they travel in any direction, there's always at least one more corridor leading off into the fog ahead. At one point they try pressing F3 to bring up the debug display and see their coordinates. It's not disabled, but it doesn't work properly either. The readout appears on screen, but the utilization stats, the chunk coordinates, and most importantly the player's location are stuck at the same values. None of them change as they move. That makes it useless for navigation, but it does tell us some other interesting things. For one, the world is still on day 0, even though they've definitely been in this world for longer than the 20 minutes a full Minecraft day takes. The dimension is also listed as the end rather than the overworld. That explains the missing sun, but not the blue sky. And according to the spawn count, there's exactly 1 hostile mob is loaded in this world, but it's not being rendered. That means Polly the sheep isn't being counted as a mob by the game, but something else is. There is a giant red arrow on the floor of the sheep room, but going through the door it points to doesn't seem to get them anywhere special. Just more indistinguishable corridors and rooms. Another thing they try for a while is walking right up against the right-hand wall of the maze. This is an old maze-solving trick called the right-hand rule. In a simple maze where every wall is connected, sticking to the right wall and following it wherever it goes will always lead to the exit eventually, without ever covering the same ground twice. It doesn't work here. They hug the right wall for 9 or 10 rooms and hallways, and then end up back in the sheep room anyway. It becomes clear gradually that the maze is cheating. No matter which path they take, which turns they make, or which direction they go, Eventually, they'll exit a corridor and end up back in the same central room. At one point, they exit from the right and try to keep going straight as long as they can. They make it 5 rooms before reaching a wall. They turn left, then straight, and the sheep comes into view ahead of them. They never turned around, so that shouldn't be possible. It seems like the teleport trigger in the tunnel at the start wasn't the only one in this area. Every time the player goes far enough from that center room, some silent logic is quietly moving them back toward it. It's difficult to tell when this happens, though there are a few parts where the camera jitter hints at it. There's no sound or message that warns the player before it occurs. And since every room and hallway looks the same, after a while they all blend together anyway. As the player meanders through the halls, there's some signs that they aren't alone. Twice they stop at a fork in the path or to turn around, and while they're not moving, footsteps are still audible somewhere in the distance. They sound the same as their own footsteps, soft tapping on the quartz floor. At one point, they turn a corner and something tall and black is standing at the other end of the hallway. The screen distorts for a second. It starts gliding along the floor towards them. There's a static sound that gets louder as it gets closer. Suddenly the sound peaks and there's another screen glitch. When it clears, the static is gone and the hallway is empty. The player looks around bewildered, but nothing else happens. It takes a lot of loops back to the beginning before the player makes their first breakthrough. The message in the book was, "Look down." It's very hard to see against the quartz floor, but there's a white trail of string on the floor in the sheep room, just behind the red wool arrow. It leads off in the opposite direction. They follow it to the next room over. It keeps going down the corridor straight ahead. They have to keep their head craned down to avoid losing track of it. It snakes through several more rooms, sometimes going straight and other times turning right or left. Eventually, it just ends abruptly in the middle of a corridor. The player follows that corridor to the next room and ends up back in a room they were already in. Looking down the hall on the left, the fence and Polly the sheep are visible. So, the string led them in a circle. They walk back to the central room, clearly disappointed. After a few seconds, the video ends. The next video on this channel was uploaded 3 days later, on May 18th, 2021. This one has no words in its title, just a single period. It starts with the player already in-game. They're in one of the rooms the string traces through. They're looking down again, but this time they see something else. It's subtle like the string was, but this room has a unique floor pattern. The other rooms are laid out with a kind of cross shape made of chiseled quartz. Here, the floor has a 5x5 grid of raw quartz blocks in the middle. Raw quartz has the same color, but a distinct texture that makes it easier to tell one tile from another. Also, one of the blocks in the grid isn't quartz at all. It's white wool. There are a number of different ciphers and message systems that make use of 2D grids, but this world and that sheep aren't named after any of the other ones. The polybius cipher encodes a single letter as a location on a grid. Here, the squares are the grid, the wool block is the message. The string wasn't a direct path to the exit the way the player was clearly hoping at first. Instead, it's providing the orientation. Standing at the door the string enters the room through and facing the floor, we can see this grid has its wool block in row 3, column 1. The player pauses the game for a second, presumably to look up which letter that corresponds to on a standard Polybius grid online. They open their book and write L on a new line. The next room the string leads to is straight ahead. Viewed from the entryway, the grid has a wool block at row 4, column 2. R. It doesn't take very long to do the whole thing from there. Partly, that's because there are only 3 distinct letters in this coded message. After a while, they remember the key and don't even need to look them up anymore. The complete sequence they end with is LR, 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 FF, R. Directions. Left, right, forward. Never back. It's a 9-room path for them to follow. Back in the sheep room, they can start plugging it in. This is evidently the actual purpose of the red arrow. to give them a point of reference to start. They face the same direction and take the left corridor. At the next one, they check the book quickly, then head right. There's a chime sound nearby. Left, right, left, right. A mechanical thrumming builds in the background as they go further and further without seeing the sheep room again. The final right turn brings them to a corridor that stops at a dead end, but this one isn't like the others. A cluster of oddly spaced yellow beehive blocks dripping with honey particles are stuck to the floor and walls. As they come closer, they see a pair of shears lying on the ground, on top of a purple wool block that replaces a tile in the otherwise seamless quartz floor. They pick it up. They use it on the closest hive. Three honeycombs pop out with a wet sound. After a second, the hive block refills with honey as if something reset its block state. A distorted version of the bee anger sound cue plays. Abruptly, a bee with a broken, flat black texture flies in from the player's left. They whip around and see dozens of black bees, all suddenly spawned into the narrow corridor behind them. They hover for a few seconds before all dying at once with a loud collective buzz. The moment they turn red and their models flip over, the screen freezes. The game crashes to the main menu. The player hovers their mouse over the single-player button for a few seconds. But they don't re-enter the game. The video ends. The third video was uploaded the following day. It goes back to the date format from the first one for its title. 05-1921. It's only 3 minutes long. It starts on the title screen again. The player re-enters Polybius. They're not in the white maze anymore, but instead back at the very beginning of the map, in front of the birch house. The shears and the beeswax are gone from their hotbar, but the book is still there. The first page still has the words "look down," followed by the sequence of directions from the string trail that they wrote down. There's also another line now, which they didn't write. Look up. Before they switch to holding the book, we can see the player's empty right hand for a second. The sleeve of their jacket now has purple splotches on it. We don't get another chance to see their whole skin, so it's unclear if that's all that's changed. They walk back inside the house, past the lectern and the broken golem. The trapdoor is again open for them. This time there's no slow fall potion to cushion their landing. They lose 4 hearts when they hit the ground. As soon as they touch the floor, they stiff their eyes up to look at the ceiling. The 1 block hole they fell through is still visible this time. They step backwards slowly, a little at a time. I think they're trying to catch the moment the teleport triggers and the hole disappears. This seems like a smart idea, right up until they accidentally walk backward into another hole that wasn't there before. A different teleport happens and they land on the ground with another crunch. Back in the sheep room. The red wool arrow is still on the floor and Polly is leashed to a fence post. But this time there's a second post standing next to it. It has a birch sign attached to it. This sign has 4 lines of text. The first contains the letters T, O, M, and E, with a space between each. The next one has an underscore, followed by the letter I and 2 more underscores. The third and fourth lines follow the same format, except the letters written are N and U, respectively. Some kind of fill-in-the-blank puzzle. They leave it alone. Instead, they approach the arrow, which now connects to a much more obvious trill of redstone, replacing the string. They follow it to another room. This only becomes clear later on, after the players had time to walk the whole circuit again. But the redstone is tracing the same 9-room loop the string was in the first iteration of the map. Only the string was traveling clockwise. The redstone is traveling counterclockwise. The player doesn't keep following it yet, though. They've learned that doesn't work. Instead, they look down at the floor. The Polybius grid is gone. The floor is mostly normal quartz, with a daylight sensor in the very center of the room. The sensor is right next to the redstone, so in theory it could power it and do something. But it'll never activate in this room because the sky is invisible. The player tries to interact with it a few times, but nothing happens. They continue on. In the center of the next room, there's a jukebox. They idle in this room for a bit before returning to the central room. As they walk in, we can see an item frame on the ceiling in the hall above them. It has a trident in it. Polly turns to look at the player. The video ends abruptly. The next video starts off with the player staring up at a clock placed in an item frame on the ceiling. It turns out there's one of these frames on the ceiling of every corridor connected to this room, 4 in total. I didn't know you could place item frames on the ceiling. Besides the trident, there's a clock, a book, and a music disc. They open their own book and note each item in its direction. Left clock, forward disc, etc. Between this video and the last one, they've clearly figured out what they have to do. They follow the redstone back to the daylight sensor room and write the first letter of their path, L. The blocks in these rooms where the grids used to be are all related to the items from the frames. A daylight sensor and a clock are both ways to tell time. A jukebox plays a music disc. The blocks map to the directions of the frames. I think the fill-in-the-blank puzzle on the sign was also hinting at this. Though if the player solved that one, they didn't include footage of it. The next room with the jukebox is F, because the disc was placed forward. The rest of the rooms follow pretty quickly. Interestingly, no room contains a block corresponding to the item frame with a trident facing backward. It seems like that block could have been a barrel of fish or a sea lantern or something. But, like the route from the first loop, the path never needs to turn backward, so it never comes up. Once they've got the full sequence, they sprint back to the main room and start going. But it's not that simple this time. They go left first, then forward, then right 3 times, then forward again, and end up back in the sheep room. They didn't make any mistake. Those directions do result in a loop. Confused, they go back to the item frames and check that they wrote the directions correctly. They did. Then they erase the path they have written down and follow the redstone to write it again. It comes to the same thing. The clip ends with the player standing idle, staring at the wall. After a while, they exit the world. The video itself keeps going, though. There's a black screen for about 40 seconds after the game footage cuts. It's entirely silent except for a distorted electronic tone at the end. The next video is the last one. The title is one word: fly. Unlike the other ones, it starts off showing a few seconds of the player's desktop before they open Minecraft. They've got a browser open to an online Java compiler with some code pasted in. It's the same code from the weird candors.java file that was bundled in polybius.zip. That becomes relevant later. When they load the world, they're facing the ceiling again. A grid of 9 lamps is there, as it has been in every room. But whatever happened off screen, they finally noticed what's different. One of the lamps isn't lit. The look up in the book wasn't just referring to the item frames. There's a variant of the Polybius cipher based on a 3x3 grid rather than a standard 5x5. It's sometimes called the touchtone cipher because it resembles old-school phone keypads. It encodes numbers. 9 slots, 9 numbers, traditionally excluding 0. The cipher is still in every room, it's just on the ceiling instead of the floor. And the message is digits instead of letters. Facing the entrance, the lamp in row 3, column 2 is the one that's off. That would be the number 8. The next room is row 2, column 2. Right in the middle, 5. They do the rest. The final sequence is 285137946. They pause the game. We don't get to see their desktop again, but after a few seconds they unpause and paste a different sequence into the book. That's what the Java file was for. The code shuffles a list of letters to new positions based on a second list of numbers. The first variable is called path. The second is called order. It's easier to see from a top-down view, but this sequence is the exact mirror image of the final path from the first loop. If both of those paths, along with the string and redstone paths, are drawn together on a grid, they make a symmetric pattern. It looks like a pair of open scissors or shears, or a head with two very long horns. The player gets back to the central room and starts walking. But then something happens. They enter a corridor and the ceiling lamps in front of them suddenly start to click off rapidly one by one. They freeze. They turn around and look behind them to see those lights are out too. There's a sound like steam escaping a hot oven. Then the static comes back. Suddenly, a moving shape seems to phase through the right wall and starts speeding down the hall towards them. The screen glitches. They just stare at it for a moment before turning and running. It hits them from behind. There's a kind of wheezing sound as the player takes damage. They pause and exit to the menu. When they reopen the world, the lights are on and the corridor is empty as if nothing happened. Their health bar is completely full. They open the settings menu to check the difficulty, but it's already set to peaceful. They slowly look around before walking back the way they came. The sheep room, at least, is easy to find. Having nothing else to go on, they start doing the path again. This time there are no interruptions. This one ends in a dead end, too. This time the hall is occupied by a clump of dead bushes. There's another purple wool block on the floor, but no item on it to pick up. They hit one of the bushes. We saw earlier that they weren't able to break blocks, but the bush breaks anyway. A pair of sticks pop out. They break another and pick up a third stick. They slowly turn and look apprehensively down the corridor behind them. They wait, but nothing else happens. After a while, they close the game and re-enter. They've reset again, but not to the house. This time they start in the central room. The lamps are all off now. There are also 3 fence posts staked in the ground. A lead is tied around one, but Polly is gone. They turn around to see a wall behind them instead of the corridor that was there before. The doorways on the left and right are also closed off. They open the book, which is still in the last slot of their inventory. It has everything they wrote in their previous sessions in it, but no new instructions. The only light in the room comes from a single block of crying obsidian on the floor. They step over it into a dim corridor and walk towards another light in the distance. There's another piece of obsidian in that room, and the left and right-hand walls are blocked again. The maze has collapsed to just one long hallway that disappears into the fog ahead of them. Unlike the blue fog seen earlier, this fog is black. That mechanical thrumming sound gradually grows in the background again. In one corridor, the light at the end of the hall is missing. Halfway down, it suddenly comes on, and then something moves in midair ahead of them. It's only a chicken. It seems to have spawned near the ceiling and gently floats down to the ground in front of the player as they approach. It looks at them. It's standing in the very center of the room, above a block of purple wool. As the player turns to walk past, an arrow suddenly flies by from somewhere ahead and kills it instantly. It drops 3 feathers and an egg. The player picks them up. A little later, they throw the egg against a wall without saying anything, breaking it. The sound that plays isn't the usual egg cracking sound cue. The feathers they keep equipped. The long hallway finally ends. They reach a room that opens not to another corridor, but to a grassy environment. It's the chunk with the birch house. They walk up to it. For a second, something is barely visible moving behind one of the windows. That crunching sound that made them turn in the first video plays again. They look up and we see the sun for the first time on this map. It's a deep orange color and much bigger than it should be. There's one last out-of-place sound and then the footage ends. That's the last video on the channel. Looking back, some things stand out. The poem that's on the lectern placed outside the Birch house is called A Venom Ripple. It describes someone named Miss Seafoam who's being made sick by a poison that's reached her brain. Polybius.zip was originally posted by a MinecraftForum.net account called Alas Dude. That's an anagram for Daedalus, the mythical Greek inventor. Most people know Daedalus as the creator of an impossibly difficult labyrinth, which was also the lair of a bull-headed monster called the Minotaur. But there are other more obscure stories about him. One, which Aristotle cited in his essay On the Soul, credits Daedalus with discovering a new method of making extremely lifelike statues. Supposedly he would carve these statues from wood and then pour mercury into their joints, and they would move just like real people. One of these statues depicted the goddess Aphrodite. Her name comes from the Greek aphros, foam of the sea. Today we know that mercury is a lethal toxin, but Daedalus was able to use it to bring dead wood to life. Historically, plenty of inventors tried to exploit mercury's unique properties to create new technologies. It often worked, but also often poisoned them. So what role is Grell supposed to be playing? Well, in the story, the labyrinth was finally solved by the hero Theseus, who escaped by using a ball of red thread given to him by a princess. He unspooled it as he entered and then followed the trail back out as he left. That princess, incidentally, is the same one Daedalus supposedly made the statue of Aphrodite for. The two trails that Grell follows to find the right directions through the maze are kind of a decomposition of the red thread. First a white string, then a trail of red dust. Except instead of being left by a friend on the other side, they seem to be coming from the maze itself. Both times Grell thinks they've discovered the path out of the maze and tries to exit, they find dead ends. The first one provides them with 3 honeycombs, the second with 3 sticks. When they actually do seem to reach the end in the last video, it's not because they solved any puzzle or did anything clever, it's because the maze only gave them one way to go. They receive 3 feathers from a chicken, seemingly by accident, right before they leave. They were being prepared for something. Maybe the most famous story involving Daedalus is the story of how he escaped, after he and his son Icarus were imprisoned in the labyrinth he designed. Daedalus engineered 2 pairs of makeshift wings out of beeswax, sticks, and feathers, so they could both fly away. Before they did, he warned Icarus that if he flew too high, the sun would melt the beeswax and his wings would come apart. He knew exactly how the escape could fail, and he knew his son. Icarus flew too high anyway, and the wings did come apart. He fell into the sea and drowned. Daedalus survived. There's another story about Daedalus that's much less well known. I didn't hear it until recently. It involves his nephew, Talos, also a gifted inventor. Daedalus trained Talos, but the boy was so brilliant that Daedalus began to worry that his student would eventually surpass him. He hated the idea of anyone, even his protege, eclipsing his fame. So he lured Talos to the top of a high tower and then pushed him off. In some versions of that story, Athena intervened and turned Talos into a partridge just before he hit the ground, saving his life. The partridge was later said to be seen circling the sky during Icarus' burial, cawing with joy. In that light, the poem from Polybius could be describing what happened not just to his statue, but also to Daedalus himself. There's a poison that makes his creations dance, mercury, but there's also a poison that animates him, jealousy. In nearly every version of the story, Daedalus cries and mourns when his son dies. But if Icarus had lived, he might have become an inventor too. There's one other thing from the videos worth talking about. The sequence of 9 numbers Grell found and used to put the directions in the second loop in order. There are kind of 2 free variables in that puzzle. The order of the blocks that tell you which word goes in a room, like the bookshelf or jukebox, and then the order of the ciphers on the ceiling. What I mean by that is there are a lot of combinations of those two sequences that would have produced the same set of directions from the video. So why that particular one? Why 285137946? Well, maybe for no reason. But I noticed that when they pressed F3 in the first video, the three-digit numbers that appeared in the frozen readout as their coordinates are 279, 139, 977. Which is not far off from what we'd get if we read the ciphered numbers as coordinates as well. 285, 137, 946. If we go back to the Planet Minecraft world and press F3, the spawn ends up being only a few blocks away from that location. 285, 137, 946 is a spot near the back right of the birch house. There's a purple wool block there, and behind it, a hole 2 blocks deep hiding an ender chest. Inside is a pair of used shears.